Welcome back, everyone, to Pontos Fathom Press. Today is our Pontos Fathom podcast, episode 10, continuing our month-long study into the Exegesis of Phillip K. Dick. In today's podcast, we're going to talk a bit about A Scanner Darkly, Dystopia, and The Angel of History, and sort of, how in some ways A Scanner Darkly represents a dystopia, but it's also kind of a secret, coded surprise from Dick, let's call it. Let's leave it at that for now. We've doing Philip K. Dick all month. We talked about his, in our last one, we talked about Ubik and K.W. Jetter's Blade Runner and some ideas of the Butcher's Wife and formations of the unconscious last time. We also have another one about anxiety, discontents, and gnosis. Today's podcast will definitely talk about the Black Iron Prison a bit as well. So let's get into it. Before we start, please like and subscribe us down below and check out Flowing the Tears of the Flesh Android, the curiously short Occupancy of Obiden. Has some Dickian influences, but definitely kind of like a Nova Express type send up of the Flesh Android. He is monitored by Professor Rona Crown, working for the continuity of government from a low orbital satellite. Her job is to keep him medicated and viable through his tear salinity to make sure that the alien tentacles stay firmly attached and keep the handlers happy. So, hey, your purchase helps out the channel. You can also join our Patreon. I'd love to hear your comments below. Okay, let's dig right into the exegesis. Let's talk a little bit about the influences from A Scanner Darkly as well. Maybe to start out with, I just wanted to read, jumping right to the punchline of the joke. I wanted to read from 1 Corinthians. It's 1 Corinthians 13. I'm going to read the whole thing because this is where we get the Scanner Darkly paraphrased from in a way. So let's just go through it. So it says, gifts nothing without charity. So 1 Corinthians 13, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not charity, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though give to my body to be burned and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. Charity suffereth long, and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth itself, and is not puffed up. Doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own. It is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil. Rejoice not in iniquity, but rejoice in the truth. Beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. From when that which is perfect is come, then that which is part shall be done away. Charity never faileth, but when there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall be vanished. When I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see through a glass, darkly, but then face to face. Now that I know in part, but then shall I know even as also I am known. And now abideth faith, hope, charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity. So, and then we go into preferable speaking. It says we have a couple things here that are pretty key to Dick choosing A Scanner Darkly from a glass, through a glass darkly. It says, for now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know it in part, but shall not know that even I am known. So we get a bit of Dick's influence here and what he's going with. A lot of what the dystopian feel of A Scanner Darkly has to do with this sense of identity, right? The identity of the identity slipping away, right? So you have some of that is through the drugs. You have the suit, right? He's like an undercover agent, right? Archer is, or Arctur is. So I just want to kind of go into this area here. It says, it is almost as if in Scanner, the personality, which is and was not occluded, was able to monitor the conscious occluded one from a detached standpoint. From having been intoxicated for 1.5 years, I know that the occlusion resembles an intoxication, perfectly recorded in a scanner, including the identity confusion, amnesia regarding the original personality. A sort of forgetting is chronicled in Scanner. It is the epitome of the occluding process. And then he's saying that now Scanner was something like his 374 event. So as we know, the Exegesis of Philip K. Dick, he has this event, kind of comes up with this idea of the Black Iron Prison, has these Gnostic revelations, and he works through that through his notes. He says right here, what I see is only a matter of degree. For me to stigmatize my own processes as occluded, I need a point of reference. I am now to know what they are, I was in Scanner, as 374s to now, i.e. 374 now Scanner. We are damaged minds trying to monitor our own damage. Right, this is amazing, right? So this idea of reflection, it's impossible to reflect, right? One of these crises we see here is the impossibility to reflect, right? And we have that kind of twofold knowledge here. So the twofold knowledge here that we have are, one, in that Corinthians passage, we're talking about not only prophecy, but being part and being the whole, right? And this idea here is that part and whole is broken. Let's go into Scanner here and talk a little bit about the paranoia, right? So I think if we look at paranoia here as well, I believe I've got a quote here. So he says, when I regard Gnosticism as anti-establishment, right, he's still going to talk about Hegelianism. And Scanner is an account of what it's like to have a self in each brain hemisphere, ideologically on opposing sides of the barricade. Okay, so let's kind of go with that. Let's kind of go with that one right there. So in Scanner, I've got a bookmark here to lead us to some of these points. So there's lots of these chilling moments in Scanner Darkly where, the hope just starts to slip away. I mean, obviously the end is so much like that, the circular nature of things. But let's go into a less cosmic detail here, just a more standard paranoia detail. And in Exegesis, Dick monitors his progress through his novels. So he talks about how each of the novels he wrote is sort of like the part of the Gnostic story of his finding out about this Gnosticism, right? So this is what the exegesis really means. He's looking through his old works. And when he gets to Scanner, he's talking about the fall. And when we say the fall of man, it's very interesting because it's the fall of Arctur, right? But there's lots of falls in this. And let's talk about that in the sense of Black Iron Prison, which can politically mean, Soviet system or the worst kinds of, American closed mind or paranoia culture, say like CIA kind of things, and how Dick would react to those sort of things, but also on that Gnostic level where reality is like a prison, or the meat of the light trapped in the meat kind of concept. But let's ground it here with this quote from Scanner Darkly in a dystopian form here. So Arctur's talking about. He's undercover He's been wearing the suit. He's been doing drugs, and he's living in the house, or he's staying in the house with his friends slash drug friends slash investigation, right? So as he drove, he continued his theoretical analysis of his situation by means of a second well-established example. They had brought it up and drilled it into his own memory banks during his police training at the academy. Or else he had read it in the newspapers. Item: one of the most effective forms of industrial or military sabotage limits itself to damage that can never be thoroughly proven, or even proven at all, to be anything deliberate. It is like an invisible political movement. Perhaps it isn't there at all. If a bomb is wired to a car's ignition, then obviously there's an enemy. If a public building or a political headquarters is blown up, then there's a political enemy. But if there's an accident or a series of accidents, if they occur, if equipment merely fails to function, if it appears faulty, especially in a slow fashion over a period of normal time, with numerous small failures and misfirings, then the victim, whether a person or party or country, can never marshal itself to defend itself. In fact, this is funny, I remember my dad used to say, the instruction manuals were purposely made to drive him crazy, right? This is the kind of idea. It's not like you're not going to make a faulty product, but you make a small error in the instruction manual just to torment people, and it raises everybody's anxiety. I mean, it's very funny, right? It's paranoid and it's funny. In fact, Arctur speculated as he drove along the freeway very slowly. The person being to assume his paranoia has no enemy. He doubts himself. His car broke down normally. His luck had just been bad. And his friends agree it's in his head. And then he wipes out more thoroughly than everything that can be traced. However, it takes longer. The person's doing him in must tinker and putter and make use of chance over a long time. That is his advantage. Every nation in the world we know trains and sends out a mass of agents to loosen bolts, strip threads here, break wires, start little fires, a wad of gum instead of Xerox copy machine, right? Too much soap and toilet paper, as the yippies of the 60s knew, can screw up the entire sewage of an office building. So you get the kind of idea here, just a small detail of how that looming paranoia fits in. Well, how does it fit in with dystopia? Well, now this is where it starts to get the institutionalized side, the erasure of safety, right? There's no more safety. So look at Arctur. As Fred, he's the drug addict friend, right? As Arctur, he's in his suit, he's an undercover agent. And then there's the blurring, right? The blurring between the roles. So what's worse in dystopia? Even if we look at a classic like a 1984 where there's Ingsoc and Newspeak, right? The idea is language has been stripped apart, right? Dystopia used to just mean a totalitarian thing, right? But the worst dystopia is where, people are lied to about assassinations that were sponsored by the government for generations, and they believe the lies, and people believe buildings falling down and believe the lies, and then, or they don't and they do, and they create that cross chatter. So, I mean, really the dystopian idea here that's really at the heart of Scanner is internally you don't recognize yourself in the mirror, sort of just like the scatter suit there, like you can't even look at yourself in the mirror. So yeah, I think that's definitely idea of the paranoia. So let's just dip back into the exegesis again for a moment, and let's just talk about BIP. Right. So one thing he says, I'm really in error when I talk about distinguishing experience or recalling worlds that there are. And he does one of his many lists here. He goes, 1, the Black Iron Prison, Rome, USSR, fascist USA. 2, this our normal world. 3, the garden world. 4, the experience of 2, the normal world, under the revealed guise in which Zebra or Logos was seen, including the set ground separation into mundane versions, the illuminated letter, passage in tears. So again, to talk about seeing our normal world through the glass darkly, through the scanner darkly, right? So what is that seeing that's happening, right? Let's go back to Corinthians again. 1 Corinthians 13. Right? So we know that exegesis, Dick was very interested in early Christianity and Gnosticism. Let's go right here to see. It says, "And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so I could move mountains, and have not charity, I am nothing." Right? So, interestingly, the concept of charity comes in here. So usually with dystopia, we have the do it to Julia kind of moment where everyone's heart breaks, or like we have Arctur ending up working for the flowers that make the D, and it's the treatment plant, and it's like the self-licking ice cream cone of capitalism, and the full Ahrimanic weight of that process. I'll probably do Philip K. Dick again in next month. We're going to be doing Rudolf Steiner next month, and Ahriman and Lucifer will be one of those topics. But maybe Dick will play back in there again. But yeah. Anyway, while we're here, hey, if you guys like what we're doing here, please like and subscribe, and join us on our Patreon. Leave us a comment below. We can chat through the comments for now. I'd like to get these going live. And once we get the channel big enough, I'll start doing these as live broadcasts, and then we can chat live. I think that will be great. So looking forward to hearing from everyone. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the dystopia now. So where does this BIP kind of fit in with, Scanner's the fall? We have prophecy but no charity. And even Dick in the end of A Scanner Darkly, he has a kind of epilogue where he talks about friends who have died. So he talks so while this is a dystopian, has its political side to it, has its prophecy side to it, he does have a charity moment in here where he talks about the nemesis of drugs, and then he lists out friends gone or brain damaged or in psychosis, and he talks about dedicates it with his love. So there is this tender moment of charity here from Dick, despite his cynicism, despite his at the time quite abrasive and abrupt hemispheric shift between different roles, right? He does have this moment of charity here. So I think some of this, like he says in the opening of Exegesis as well, he says giving voice to the voiceless, and here he's called out the names of the dead. What can I do? Exactly what I've done, my voice for the voiceless. So he's sort of holding a line, he feels. He's connecting to the black iron prison world, in the garden world, to the metamorphosis. The former is that what is it was. Our world is a continually advancing state of the process going on. The garden world, the tranquility outcome, the end state headed toward. Basically, my speech is correct but not radical enough. So this is a great place to maybe jump into the idea of dystopia and history here, because some of this is about forgetting too, right? So when he talks about black iron prison here, he mentions the Soviet system, and how the Logos comes down for us, right? One of the things that's very fascinating here would be the angel of history, and people who know the work of Walter Benjamin will he points to a painting by Klee called Angelus Novus, right? So this is I'm reading from Benjamin here. It says, Angelus Novus shows an angel looking as though he is about to move away from something he is fixedly contemplating. His eyes are staring, his mouth is open, his wings are spread. This is how one pictures the angel of history. His face is turned toward the past. Where we perceive a chain of events, he sees one single catastrophe which keeps piling wreckage and hurls it in front of his feet. The angel would like to stay, awaken the dead, and make whole what has been smashed. But a storm is blowing in from paradise. It is caught in his wings with such a violence that the angel can no longer close them. The storm irresistibly propels him into the future, to which his back is turned, while the pile of debris before him grows skyward. And this storm is what we call progress. Right? So Walter Benjamin, the angel of history, right? The angel novus, right? This angel of history, his back toward the future, at his feet the rubble of the past. He can see all the sins, right? And yet he keeps moving. And let's go back to forgetting, because Arctur ends up in a forgetting state too. But before he forgets, he has his doubt, right? He has a Gethsemane garden kind of moment almost, we'll say. So the other scene that you may know where we're going here, but is when Arctur, with his undercover name of Fred, he's being checked in the all-white room, where steel fixtures and steel chairs and steel desk all bolted down. In fact, on the right stood a weighing scale with a sign, "Have technician only adjust." 2 deputies regarded him, both in full uniform of the Orange County Sheriff's Office, but with medical stripes. "You're Officer Fred?" Yes, sir," Fred said. He felt scared. "All right, Fred. First, let me state that, as you undoubtedly are aware, your briefings and debriefings are monitored and later played back for study in case anything we missed in the original session. This is SOP, of course, and it applies to all officers reporting orally, not only you." The other medical deputy said, "Plus all other contacts you maintain with the department, such as phone contacts, additional activities, such as your recent public speech in Anaheim at the Rotary Club, boys, Lions Club," Fred said. "Do you take substance D?" the left-hand medical deputy said. "That question," the other deputy said, "is moot because it's taken for granted that in your work, you're compelled to take D. So don't answer. Not that it would be incriminating, but it's simply moot." He indicated a table with a bunch of blocks and other riffraff colored plastic objects lay. "Step over here and be seated, Officer Fred. We're going to administer briefly several easy tests. This won't consume much of your time, and there's no physical discomfort involved." "Yeah, about the speech I gave," Fred said. "What this is about," the left-hand doctor said, as he seated himself and produced a pen from some forms, "stems from a recent departmental survey showing that several undercover agents working in this area have been admitted to the neural aphasia clinics during the past month. You're conscious of the fact of highly addictiveness of substance D," the other deputy said to Fred. "Sure," Fred said. "Of course I am. We're going to give you these 2 tests now, in this order, starting with what we call the BG, or you think I'm an addict?" Fred said. Whether you're an addict or not is not a prime issue, since it's a blocking agent is suspected from the Army Chemical Warfare Division sometimes within the next 5 years. These tests do not pertain to the addictive properties of substance D, but to, well, let me give you this set ground test first. It determines your ability to readily distinguish set from ground. So they kind of go on through this testing of him, and it gets into the cross chatter. He goes, "What do you see?" And he goes, "I see a Coke bottle. A soda pop bottle is correct. Have you noticed anything," Fred said, "in studying my briefings like that? Anything slushed?" "It's the speech," he thought. "What about the speech I gave?" he said. "Did I show bilateral dysfunction there? This is why I've been hauled in here for tests?" "No, this is routine," the seated deputy said. "We realize, Officer, that undercover agents must of necessity take drugs in the line of duty. And those who go into the federal permanently? No, not many permanently. Again, this is a percent contamination that could be a course of time rectify itself as murky," Fred said. "It murks over everything." "Are you getting any cross chatter?" one of the deputies asked him. "What?" he said uncertainly. Between hemispheres. If there's damage to the left hemisphere where the linguistic skills are located, then sometimes the right hemisphere will fill in its best ability." "I don't know," he said. "Not that I'm aware of." "Thoughts not your own, as if another person or mind were thinking, but different from the way you would think? Even foreign words that you don't know? That's learned from peripheral perception sometimes during your lifetime." Nothing like that I've noticed. You probably would. From people with left hemispheric damage who've reported it, evidently it's pretty shattering experience. Well, I guess I'd noticed then. So anyway, the paranoia of this scene is great, right? The paranoia here is really palpable in that he's doubting himself. He's got these two deputy doctors talking to him at the same time on slightly out of phase with each other, right? And we see this here where he says, Scanner is an account, this is back from the Exegesis, Scanner is an account of what it's like to have a self in each brain hemisphere, ideologically on opposing sides of the barricades, right? And so he talks about the anti-establishment Christianity, and he talks about this Hegelian idea too, where there's this need for this synthesis, right? So I think this is a good place for us to jump into just a bit of, we're talking about phasing again. Again, we started out with through the glass darkly, and then through a scanner darkly, and then let's just jump in for a moment into Lacan. So in Lacan's Écrits, he has a couple of different essays. One of them is the mirror phase. So in Lacan, he talks about the mirror phase. Again, this is one of those early theories of Lacan where it's about when a child first recognizes himself in a mirror. Okay, and it sort of leads into some other things. But before Lacan developed his mirror phase, he had worked on something called the looking glass phase, which is very interesting because it's through the glass darkly, right? A scanner darkly. And it even reminds us of the film version of Scanner Darkly, where Keanu Reeves plays Arctur in Fred, but then Keanu Reeves also has that mirror scene in The Matrix, right, where he wakes up from The Matrix, which is very much exegesis-like, you know. So the idea of ego formation is really at play here. So it's the way that the person identifies with the self, and you know, some of this is a mimetic, some of it is copying, right? There is some copying going on, and they even think that some writers claim that Lacan sort of borrowed these concepts from this idea of animals altering their physical appearance in accordance with the environment. You know, again, we see the octopus changing. I don't think Lacan ever fessed up to that, but the idea is, you know, there's this idea of Lacan doing many studies into the idea of reflecting on one's self, right? So when we talk about dystopia now in the modern sense, dystopia almost becomes not the prison of bars, not the totalitarian machine, but the place in which one can no longer reflect on oneself. It's the fear of losing oneself. And now again, again, at the end of, you know, spoilers alert, at the end of Scanner Darkly, obviously Arctur is, you know, in a vegetative state. He's kind of joined the recovery cult. He's a fraction of the person he used to be. But there's that kind of forgetting that definitely happens, right? There's forgetting that happens. And we see some of that forgetting in Ubik too, right? So in Ubik, the series of forgetting, we roll back the history, right? We're going back to the past. We're forgetting stuff, right? But the grimmest version of this might be with Freck's final moments, right? Where he's going to leave this world ahead of schedule. The next thing he knew, so he has his Merlot, his Mondavi Cabernet Sauvignon, that's what it is. The next thing he knew, a creature from between dimensions was standing beside his bed, looking down at him disapprovingly. The creature had many eyes, all over it, ultra-modern, expressive-looking clothing, and rose up 8 feet high. Also, it carried an enormous scroll. "You're going to read me my sins?" Charles Freck said. The creature nodded and unsealed the scroll. "Yes." Freck said, lying helplessly in his bed, and it's going to take 100,000 hours. Fixing its many compound eyes on him, the creature from between dimensions said, we are no longer in the mundane universe. Lower plane categories of material existence, such as space and time, no longer apply to you. You have been elevated to the transcendental realm. Your sins will be read to you ceaselessly, in shifts, throughout eternity. The list will never end. It's horrible, but it's funny. Know your dealer, Charles Freck thought, and wished he could take back the last hour of his life. 1,000 years later, and he was still lying there in his bed with the Ayn Rand book and the letter to Exxon on his chest, listening to them read his sins to him. They had gotten up to the first grade when he was 6 years old. 10,000 years later, they had reached the 6th grade. That year, he had discovered the spicy self-love act. He shut his eyes, but he could never see the multi-eyed 8-foot-high being with the endless scroll reading on and on. And next, it was saying, Charles Freck thought, at least I got a good wine. Right? So this is sort of this, it's a twist on dystopianism, right? It's a twist on dystopianism. The last point, and again, I just want to call this out again. You know, we talked about Benjamin's Angel of History with the back toward the future. But if we go back to that tradition of what's happening inside of the exegesis, the escape from the BIP is more akin to something about forgetting, right? So the idea here is something is coming into existence. So Dick calls out where Scanner is the fall, Valis is sort of like his Paul moment, right? So here he says, to me, Thomas is millennialism. Here Christianity and Marxism unite, the PTG in the place of the BIP. Christians are communists, and the real secret communists are Christians. The dangerous visions in faith is correct to know the side. Thomas is a dedicated Marxist revolutionary. From his viewpoint, he is a true secret Christian, but I would never grasp. This is Thomas from Biblical. And this footnote here from the editor says, Dick's Christianity was somewhat revolutionary. Here it becomes Marxism. It's not quite the leftist Christianity, but it does mention here Walter Benjamin, whose visionary Angel of History sees that we experience as time and progress as a mounting pile of wreckage. Dick anticipates the return to Christianity, like Alan Baidu and Zizek. So the idea here is, it's a twist on the dialectical materialism, and again, we're talking about the mustard seed, right? So, in the end, although there is a huge dystopian fall in Scanner, it reveals itself that, well, there are more mechanisms, like in Ubik, right? We find there's more mechanisms. We're awakened to more mechanisms. And in the end, you know, again, homage back to Corinthians, this might be a crypto way, a crypto vehicle for Dick's newfound spirituality, right? So in the end, I guess we'll kind of leave it at this point that, you know, in the Ouroboros of things, you go from, and I've got a yin yang here on the page as well. He goes, I'm dead, I'm alive, I'm dead, I'm alive. So the idea of this circular nature, Sophia, Logos, the return of the Logos, right? The acts within the whole, right? The acts can be derived, right? So the idea is we're coming back around to a final redemption almost. So while there's a dystopian side, and I'm not saying the redemption is, you know, Archer in the new life fields growing the plants. That's not the redemption. Where the redemption, though, is it's in the going across Dick's work, in this exegesis work that he's done. And maybe I'll end it with this quote, which is quite good. He says, I seek beauty like Parsifal sought the Grail, but what a price I pay. I don't write beautifully. I just write reports about our condition to go to those outside of Cold Pack. I am an analyzer. And then finally he says, whoever the funning player is, she is a delight. Sophia, I think it's you. Right? So I think in the end, yes, there's dystopianism. Yes, if you buy into it all and you try to track it, there's lots of examples of this. And I think what we'll do in the next podcast is we will talk about Dick as a prophet versus Dick as a political activist, because I think that that's really the key to how one digests the dystopia, right? If you look at the bars, you see bars. If you float through the bars, there are no bars, right? And I think, again, this is where that charity comes back in, that a lot of what Dick's exegesis work is it coming to grips with some of these ideas. And we'll talk more about those in our next podcast. So, guys, hope this was interesting to you. We talked a little bit about Scanner Darkly. We talked about Dystopia and Dick's kind of crypto redemption. His moment of, Saul of Tarsus kind of moment where he becomes the Apostle Paul. Kind of, this is Dick's own exegesis, looking at his books as a Gnostic journey. So, hey guys, I'd love to see your comments below. Anybody's read the exegesis, please check it out. If you haven't read Scanner Darkly, please check it out. If you have some comments on Dystopia, Scanner Darkly, please leave them below. And we will see you in the next podcast. Thank you very much and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.